So I'm going to quickly, if it rings, I'm just going to quickly mute myself.
Sure.
And hopefully it won't ring, but I just like to apologize
Okay.
to Deidra. I've had relatives over the whole week.
Right. I told her that.
And it's been a clown show here.
Okay.
That's the best
I
way
told
of
her that.
describing
I
it.
told her that. I just, yeah.
Okay, Facebook says they're ready if we're ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, so Vicki, first thing is flip the switch that turns the light on. Is the light
Yes,
on?
yes.
Put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you are on the air.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Peace. I am your host, Deidra Emel of the Western New York Peace Center. And today, I would love to thank Richard Wicca as our producer of Think Twice Radio. And today we are going to talk about talking peace through time. So I want to talk about how it got started and where we want to take things into the future. So our guest today is Mr. Jim Anderson, Vicki Ross, our co-host and guest today, Richard Wicca. Hopefully he'll chime in as he sees fit. There he is, and Jack Kanack. So thank you so much for coming and for being on the show today.
Very
Thank
exciting.
you for having us.
I'm so excited that Jack is on this show because he is the number one person to be on this show.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's been kind of rough around here personally. But I'll just start out. Back around 2011, Charlie Bowman was then the interim director of the Western New York Peace Center. And we previously, earlier in 2010, I did some work with him regarding hours of daylight. And he took me up to the Peace Center. I got to know a little bit about what the Peace Center did, met some office people there. And I said to Charlie, at the time I was producing shows at WBNY, and one of the other producers, he got, I guess, caught stealing. And he was kicked off, and I inherited a whole bunch of blank time. And I said, I've got to do some shows. And there wasn't any type of radio in Buffalo that all it was corporate people talking to people about issues about corporate. Of course, with Jim Anderson, he had his own show.
Yes, of course.
There wasn't really any other show. And basically, I said to Charlie, we have to do a show that actually talks to people about issues that affect people instead of getting the corporate line. We had, Sheriff Howard, and he had spokesmen talking about how great his jail was, where the Peace Center show had actual people that were either in jail or relatives of people that were in jail. So you'd have a totally different perspective of what was going on in that jail. And that type of radio is what type of radio that was needed in Buffalo. And we were talking about Latin American solidarity, what's happening in Chiapas at the time, and how people of color, how people that were minorities are just being basically screwed over. And you would just get the corporate line. So it started as a summer show in 2011. And then once the kids came back to school, of course, the show was gone. And we received a lot of positive results from the show, a lot of positive feedback. So in 2012, we kind of made it a permanent show. And then it kind of stuck. And then we had some people that were public affairs directors said, we only had a 1 hour show. Let's make it a 3 hour show. So,
wow.
At one point we were a 3 hour show. So, Vicki is remember those days. It's
Well, actually, the way I remember it is we were a 2-hour show, but what kept happening is the person who had the next hour kept not
Yeah.
showing up. And so you'd say, hey, we have another hour. Do you want to do another hour? And especially if I was with Jim, I would always say, well, sure. So I've gotten that for a while. I was in a habit where I kept saying, yes, yes, we'll do another hour. I just wouldn't turn it down. But by the end of 3 hours, I was definitely feeling it. And so then I got in a little, what? Talked
Were you
out.
all talked out?
Yes, yes.
Well, yeah. And then the thing was, I was producing shows before that. So I was like producing shows for 6 hours or 7 hours.
Yes.
And then one public affairs director said she called it a week of caring. And she says, can we do an 8-hour Peace Center show? So one year we did remember we did that 8-hour Peace Center show.
Sure.
Wow.
Sure.
And I think Vicki took
Incredible.
half of it and Jim Anderson took the other half.
Is that what it was?
Remember that?
You know what? I don't even remember that, and that's the scary
With
part.
Jessica Kosick as news director, we did.
Sure. Yes, I
did
do
an
remember.
8-hour
Now that
Peace
you
Center
mention
show.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the first hosts were who was the
Charlie
host?
Bowman.
Charlie Bowman by himself, or was there a co-host too?
There wasn't a co-host. It was Charlie Bowman. He only did an hour show, but at the
Okay.
time the station didn't have Democracy Now, so he did the first 10 minutes of the show was actually a recap of what was going on in Democracy Now for that day and that week.
Mhm.
So it would inform listeners regarding that, and then he would have guests.
Okay.
And then after Charlie took over the show, after he was no longer interim director, when Vicki came by, it was, a full blown show for an hour.
Okay.
And then it was 2 hours. And then we finally, some weeks we made it 3 hours. When Avery Edwards was the news public affairs director, he gave us 3 hours. So
Incredible. That's just incredible. Because after 2 hours, I'm just like, okay, Vicki, I gotta go.
more shot.
Well, it's no lie that by the end of 3 hours, it wasn't. I mean, it was some days were better or worse than others, but there were a lot of days after 3 hours. It was like,
You were mentally, it wasn't physically exhausted, it was mentally exhausted.
But what I'd say is, so then I got in a little habit where every time you offered, like, the person's not here, you could do another hour. I'm like, no, we're not doing another hour. So it went in like splurges. Do you remember that, Jim?
I remember everything that he's saying.
Yes.
I
yes.
definitely do.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say Jim is the one who made it easy. So it would be very easy to
absolutely.
talk. I could talk with Jim, and learn from Jim and listen to Jim. Jim is the radio king. So that's why I asked him to be the co-host. So I knew if I had Jim, if we didn't have a guest, didn't matter. If we didn't, and we had call-in, which we don't have now. We haven't figured that out really. We had a call-in show.
Yeah, and hopefully if they get people back in the studio, you could have a call-in show again.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great.
And you never know what you're going to get with a call-in show, but I know one of your questions had to be like one caller really stuck with me, and that was a caller who was an African American, and she got pulled over by the police because she had bald tires on her way to work, but it was one of these checkpoints on the east side. And they find her, and then they find her, with the fines and fees, it was hundreds of dollars. And she couldn't afford to buy tires. That's why they were bald. And now she couldn't afford to, still buy tires and pay the fee. And it just struck me. And we were just saying during the show, why don't you just have a solution where you give the person an incentive to get the tires and don't worry about, charging this fee to a person that can't afford a fee.
Right. That's right.
And those are the callers that really, have a place in my heart that And another person that was kind of a regular caller was Radio Girl all the time.
Oh, right.
Like
Oh,
there was
I
always a
remember Radio
show.
Girl.
Yeah, Radio Girl would just call in and try. And sometimes they were a little off topic,
Right.
They would Vicki.
Every time. I do remember her.
I do.
For the rest of you, do you all have a memory of either a show or a caller or what have you that like kind of hit deeply, that was kind of a heavy topic, or that touched you in a different kind of way?
One thing that really touched me at the time, what I would do was when I was producing, I would produce the show, but I would train students at the station how to produce a show. So we would have students producing a show, and I would watch them and train them. And if they showed up, hopefully they would produce a show. If not, I would take over. Or if they had classes, I would take over during the show. And our one public affairs news director, Avery Edwards, he had one of his best friends shot in Syracuse with gun violence. And he tried to explain that on the show. And that really stuck with me. Another person that stuck with me, the departed Frank Gage. He talked about his times during one of the holidays, I think it was Memorial Day, about his times in Vietnam and how he was under attack. And he was sent out as a scout to see if there was any trouble before the rest of the troops came. And he really opened up on the show, and he talked about it. He didn't really want to talk about it ever, but he did on the show, and I'm so glad that he did.
Wow.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing.
That was a really heavy show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jim, what about you?
Well, I found that the show, when I came to the show, I don't remember the year, but I immediately recognized the tool that the show was. I mean, they were already dealing with some of the topics that needed to be thrust forward, but I also was recognizing here's a tool that they have access to, and there are plenty opportunities to tie folks in to bring a message that could nourish the whole community. The challenge is in recognizing the tool, identifying what support you need, and making it the place to be, the place to go. And the other thing was recognizing that we're talking into a community that is underdeveloped by design. I mean, we got political representatives that have never spoken in this community about the importance of foreign policy in its relation to social justice and the monies needed to address social justice. Right away, that creates a big pool of ignorance because most people are looking to their politician to bring them the sort of like first information on whether this is something that is of value to them. And then when you look at the fact that we were already in a heavily and still are militarized community in terms of the kind of false patriotism that got people saluting. It's got people saying, thank you for your service, and they don't even know what the heck people did in many of the places overseas. I'm a combat veteran. And folks, if they were to ever ask me what it was like over there, they wouldn't want to hear it because at the end, they would either be mad at me or the people that sent them and never recognizing I ought to be mad at them. Every time I hear people say, thank you for your service, it sometimes I almost want to bite them, but I take the time to kind of point out to some of them, hey, look, why are you thanking me? Why? Answer that part. For the illusion that you think that happened? Well, anyway, all that's to say that the radio station and the topics that were coming across Talking Peace had begin to have profound impact. And other than like some of the interruptions that would happen at the college where, maybe couldn't be on air, I think that could affect, listeners, but I think people were beginning to get tuned into the station that period of time. And I think the opportunity, if we get back there, and if we had 2 to 3 hours to bring in voices that not only are here locally and talk about the things that are happening on the ground, but to bring in national voices and indeed international voices in this intersectional moment. I thought the early years with Charlie and this whole piece of what Jack and them were doing were really great. I mean, to have an opportunity to talk about peace when most people think those issues are over their head, and when you're talking in a toxic masculinity community where it's still about who got the power. This is exactly what Amanda Gorman said. Her point could fit what's being done by Talking Peace. The hill we climb, to get people to know the real information, to get people to start thinking, to challenge this dynamic that is roping all our young people into thinking, oh, you got to be in the military in order to get education. Then what the heck do we have educational institutions and state funding and Fed funding for education? Why that route? Anyway, I still think to this day, the show itself is really great. And I don't know if people recognizing how dynamic and iconic to have a show named Talking Peace. It's inviting automatically. If people knew no substance, when they hear Talking Peace, they kind of like resonate. And when you explain the depth of what it is and they really listen, they're ready to engage. And as Jack said, sometime call in. See, keeping that open is how people start feeling connected. Because otherwise, most people feel like the radio, they get nervous. But the show, I thought, is still great.
Who came up with the
Well-
name? Anybody remember?
I wonder if it had that name from the beginning. I mean, certainly it
Yeah.
didn't come on with. I think I started when Charlie stepped aside as director, which would have been 13. 2013. But anyway, it had the name Talking Peace already, and I think it had that name from the very beginning.
Yeah,
So
I
think you and he must have developed
yeah,
that.
we came up with a name. I know I wrote the promo that we played on the air, and we wanted to emphasize the talking piece and all of the committees, the the
Task forces.
task
Yeah,
forces,
right.
and what this was all about, and to have people get in with these task forces and learn more about their community, whether it's about policing or Latin American solidarity or environmental justice.
Indeed.
And that's pretty much what we did with the programming, was just to try and just cover all those bases, which is back to what the Western New York Peace Center does as a rule anyway, which is bringing out, how things are connected, all the interrelated interconnectedness of our issues, talking about principles in the spirit. But anyway, and talking about all those various issues and then some. Talking about
Yeah.
events that were going on, campaigns that were going on, and of course, we did, and especially with help from Jim, and also from just our general activism and knowledge of very kind, very dedicated people who just giving their life. There's the Kings Bay Plowshares were on different one. Claire Grady, Mark. Colville, Kathy Kelly, Medea Benjamin, so many, or international. We've had people, not so much that were overseas, but who are from overseas, and
That deal
people
with internet, yeah.
all over.
Medea
Aisha
Benjamin.
Juman, Aisha Juman, talking about Yemen with Kothar. I can't remember her last name.
We did the on air with the Afghan peace group. Early?
Now we never actually got to do that as a radio show because
Ah.
it's always their timing was just never such that we could do it on the radio. What we could do, and we might have done, was replay some part or pieces of things, and we mostly didn't do that, but every once in a while we did, or play a clip of something.
Right. We did unique programs around Dr. King. I remember
Oh
one
yes,
particular where we
yes,
had a series of speakers,
yeah,
Joseph Gershon at the time, who was with
yes,
the American French
yes,
Service
yep,
Committee, and
yep.
who is now the
Thanks
executive
to you.
director of the Campaign for Peace and Peace,
Hmm.
Disarmament, and Common Security. We had Vincent Ntandi, who wrote
Right,
African Americans Against the Bomb. We
right,
had we had right here in our own state, up in Albany, Larry Whitman, one of the great scholars around the whole early development of the peace movement. And I mean, we
thanks to
have
you,
the
Jim.
national voices,
Yes.
and we still have access to them. Today, even if
Hmm.
you didn't already have this show, there's a link with the Iranian uh, leadership. I've been talking to them about the need to engage at community level, to make themselves available to speak from their own view and concern, but speak into the community so that in this connecting the dots moment, we might do so.
Right.
If you remember, when we think about Ferguson, that is where you saw one of the beautiful interconnections of the Palestinian issues and what was happening in Ferguson.
Right.
And so it behooves all of our areas and countries who already have residents and some type of organization here who are dealing with the same kind of not only political structure that has so many statesmanshipless politicians, but a lot of corporate hands reaching in and obstructing the governance of cities all over the world. It behooves them to understand why we must share this information with each other. All around the world, they know about Black Lives Matter. But I will tell you that right here, where Black Lives Matter is, they don't know about the issues around the world that are the same as theirs. And I don't want it to be lopsided where, yeah, they want the world to embrace their concern, but we also have to embrace the concerns of the world because we got a common villain.
Right.
Well,
That's right.
that makes me think of peace through justice at home and abroad. Sounds
Yes,
like a
that's
mission
exactly
statement.
right. Right. And that's how we get people to understand that the work we do abroad starts right here. We talk about here we got a weatherman well versed and know the concern. So when we talk and know a whole lot around the whole climate and environment, so when we talk about those issues and getting good policy here, if our policy doesn't stop the international reach of the profiteers who are the polluters of the planet, if our policy here doesn't stop them here from reaching abroad, then the little bit we do to protect our little country is not going to help us because you can't fix one part of the climate. You got to fix climate for the whole world. That's why in 2014, when the climate march started, it said this takes everybody
Right.
and so, yeah, we're in
Actually,
that moment.
I wanted to say one of the shows that I'll mention two shows that I thought of as particularly hard hitting, and one was when Zach Graymont called us from California, who had what was it? What was his show called again? The weather. What?
No, it was Weather Buff.
Weather Buff. Weather Buff.
Yeah,
That's what it
Weather
was.
Buff. Yeah,
Weather Buff.
I trained him on the show. Yeah.
Yes, you did. You certainly did. And what a great young man. And I've been thinking of him because of all the heat and the fires and everything else in California. And he called while when they were one of the worst times from where he was, of how scary and how dangerous and how, unbelievable it was to him what was going on.
Yeah.
And another
There was a fire right
Right
by his
there.
house,
Right.
and he's calling the show,
right.
the forest fire.
And then
You
and
see?
then another one actually was more recent, and this is what made me really. This is another way that talking piece is so useful. So it's been so useful to amplify these voices that are speaking to all these various issues and how they're, local, national, international issues. Um, but that also there's a way about it that people who might normally argue or might not be able to talk about it, they could talk about it. So it really started with me when we had that realization of just how much it could be used as a tool for just to help people have a conversation about a thing. When the Buffalo schools were so in the news. And actually, Jack, you trained me on this of like, you want to get that controversial thing that's happening is the thing
Right.
you want to be talking about because everybody's talking about it already anyway. So we wanted to talk about the schools. So we had people who had, one a parent and one a teacher, talking about their feelings about what was going on in the school. And it was a great show, you know. And so then when we did it with students especially when it was very, just really coming to a head in Israel and Palestine just recently, just a couple of months ago, a couple of months ago, and having that show with students, actually both UB students from the UB Hillel and from UB students for Justice in Palestine. And that was a great conversation. And by the way, I want to say the other thing about the radio show is that it's a radio show, but it's also has this it's like the second life, is the video show. So it
Right.
also has this live stream on Facebook where we get hundreds, or even for some of them, we've had thousands of views. And then it gets put on the Peace Center's YouTube channel. So that keeps that as a just a resource for the community to learn about things like what's going on in West Valley or about Line 3 or about any of these issues that we were just talking about.
And Deidra, remember the other day the expression, and you're going to hear it all the time, and it's always been said around peace, is that peace is more than the absence of war. And so all those topics you heard Vicki just mention in a different angle, they connect. But it's up to those who are in the movement to bring expression to those connections. It's the same thing when we look around and we see people who are concerned about climate or education or job. It's up for us to show the connections to that. And one of the classic things, something that has been talked about a lot on the show, have been the Poor People's Campaign.
Right.
That's right in our ballpark. That's where Dr. King started from.
Right.
When he spoke at Riverside, he was we already know he was leading the Poor People's Campaign then, and he understood the money needed was being wasted on war in the Pentagon budget. Plus, he understood the inhumanity of war. And he understood it then, but we as a nation didn't understand it. We were so deeply in our militarization. And again, you saw the long arm of the political structure reach in, because LBJ, who had already moved the Civil Rights Act, was feeling like, hey, I done everything that I need to do. And he didn't like the fact that Dr. King was speaking against the war, because it brings more pressure on those in the political seats to do something. And so what did he do? What we see happening with a lot of political, they reach out into the community where they dangle grants and where they can kind of like say, hey, well, look, Dr. King talking like that, he's going to create trouble. You got to get him to quiet down. That's why Black organizations rejected that civil rights and peace go together. It was the wrong rejection for the wrong reason.
Right.
more funding and not really good caring reach of the political leaders at that time. And here we are again with Reverend Barber bringing forth the very issues we talk about, connecting them to all the areas we talk about, from climate to employment to education to healthcare. And so we're at the right point, which raises even more the value of talking peace and why it needs to, whether it's back on air or whether it's coming across this type of venue. And truly, hopefully, we can rock them both going forward.
Well, thanks to Richard and to Jack. You all rock. You guys have really been keeping us, afloat. So, yeah, it's much appreciated. All your hard work that you do every single week.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Deidra. One thing I was going to say regarding when we first started this show, I was producing, but I'm kind of getting an education from Charlie Bowman because I knew the issues were bad, but I didn't think they were like that bad, right? And then I did Vicky's show and Jim Anderson was on there, and I'm getting all this education. I'm listening to every show, and Jim's bringing in nuclear experts, and they're telling us about how many bombs, and 30 bombs will destroy the world, but we've got 3,000 bombs, nuclear bombs, and it's like, man, this isn't bad. This is like really bad. And after the show, sometime I just wanted to jump in the shower and clean myself because it was so bad. But in a way, I really want to thank Jim Anderson and Vicki Ross and Charlie for that education. I mean, I was producing, but it was quite the education.
Well, and I want to thank you. First of all, as Deidra said, there's no show without producers. And it's just as simple as that. It's period. End of story. But the other thing I wanted to say is about the policing, locally and the issues, even the fare, fines, and fees. So you brought it up when you were just talking about that caller. And I wanted to shout out that we are actually part of the Western New York Peace Center is part of a suit about those checkpoints. And that was the beginning of the Fare, Fines, and Fees Coalition, which is now, very, it's been one of hugely effective because when there were all those fines, for a while, there were 13 new fines or 15 new fines all added on that we featured it plenty. We also worked on the campaign along with Partnership for the Public Good and, lots of great allies. Colored Girls Bike too, which really took the lead. Jolanda Hill, has done a fantastic job, and it's still going on with bringing down the speed cameras and replacing it with design, not enforcement. So that's something that was very, very immediate. So it's been about educating people or giving people a venue for talking about things. But when you said about the intensity, I want to say that also there is so much intensity around the past years. So especially, I'm going to say, while we had He Who Shall Not Be Named in office, and especially as things were leading up to the transition that was the untransition, and now we have an instant replay of that, I think, also locally, but I don't want to get into that. But
we got to keep our 501c3.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So we'll just say, though, that one of the things we did was then we started using Talking Peace for nonviolent direct action type training, for nonviolence training, for de-escalation training, and things like that to help people sort of think about that and replay those shows. We had a program all set up with God Bless WBNY to, if things really, started to really zoom out of control, that they would play those shows over and over if need be. And this is also during the pandemic. And the other thing is that locally there is a lot of fascist energy that is there are the watchmen and people who are armed and dangerous and threatening people. So that's been going on, and we've had shows about that. We've had people on that are, doing the research and then sharing the research on the show. So those have been some, it wasn't that the shows were difficult, it's that the issues are so difficult. And then the show is like, as Jim was saying, this tool, this vehicle for like, well, we have this going on, let's talk about it here.
Yeah, and it also gives you a chance to expand your view, your circle of possible influence.
Sure.
Here you are
Absolutely.
on a college campus whose goal is to educate. In fact, Jack was very clear about that. And so here was a show that even provided opportunity to nurture having someone from the school come on, but also had to think in the context of the information they're providing that it be of value to the students on the campus. That's part of the endearment to the campus that will say, hey, and because it's unique in itself, there was no other show like it anywhere going on. Anywhere else you go, it's going to be like what Jack mentioned earlier. You're either going to find shock jocks who are bringing you the daily rhetoric that's pushing and denying the what really needs to be done. And here come Jack and Charlie coming forth with a show that for some people was a sleeper. Some people would probably said to him, I don't know why you're wasting your time. Nobody's going to listen. This thing is blooming. And actually, I would say it is in a state of pregnancy still because it has much to deliver.
Sure.
And so this is a great moment. And you coming on board
absolutely
is going to help make a difference because, we're consciously recognizing the racial dynamics. And we know that this is important in this moment. So this is really great. In fact, with all of the women that have been in leadership at the Peace Center, I think they bring a unique presence to this kind of work because they bring that image of motherism, which is of great value, whether they have biological or children who they embrace as almost like their own. This is a great moment. This is a really great moment.
Wow. And speaking of like going into the future for Talking Peace and moving to some next levels, are there any kind of shows that you would like to see going forward? And if the audience don't know, we have been hinting at it for the last 2 months. Vicki and I will be the main host for Talking Peace, and Vicki will be starting a new chapter in our next hour of Talking Peace with the Interfaith Peace Network. So I'm excited about that. And so are there any topics that you want to see Talking Peace tackle in the near future?
I think what we need is definitely a mix of both some national speakers, and then you need some local shows where you tie in what's happening locally. During the pandemic, we had the protests and people got hurt, people got run over, but all we hear is the one side of the story. The only place you could hear that other side of the story was by tuning into Talking Peace, where Vicki had the guests of the person, in the car that was shot because she ran over the police officer, and what exactly happened. You get that different perspective, and that's what's needed going forward. And there's certain rallies that I know wasn't mentioned, but were on during Talking Peace, and we had live people, sometimes Vicki, report from the rallies what was going on. So you hear another station in town, they're saying, well, why would anyone come to this rally? There were only 24 people. And Vicki's there and is like, well, there's 300 people. There's not 24 people. There's quite a difference. And that's what we
Yeah.
need going forward. But we definitely need some national guests. I'd like to see the Reverend Barber,
Oh,
as a guest on. Okay, maybe AOC as a guest. You know,
well, let's just say Buffalo has been getting in. I want to go to this. Buffalo has been getting more in the national news. So we've had some very big reasons to get in the national news, and one of them being our very own Martin Gugino, who is
Right.
a Peace Center member. I just saw him yesterday at the Buffalo 5
is he doing
non-hearing.
well? Is
Oh,
he
he's
doing
yeah,
well?
he's doing well. He's doing
Yeah.
fine.
Okay,
He's
because
healing up, but he's at 75. He's still very committed to all of the issues that he
Mhm.
ever was. He must be 76 now. But anyway, and Cariel Horn, and now this recent election has hit the national news in a very big
Right.
way, and I guess it seems that it's going to continue. I think I can say that without any problem to our 501c3 status. But so as we are more in the national news, I think that does increase our possibility of getting national speakers, or our speakers like Cariel Horn was on our board for, and she's been on Talking Peace numerous times.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
Martin. So
Yeah.
is Martin. So has India Walton, just by the way. Mayor Brown has not, but anyway.
He was offered.
He's been offered. He's been offered.
He's been
yep.
offered several
Yep,
times.
Yep, that's true. So
We wanna
so
get that.
anyway, I did want to say one thing, that Jack, you brought a lot of great shows onto WBNY, and they do have lots of great programming. And I think that has, there was that lull when people couldn't get in the studio. Now perhaps it's resuming a little bit with the students are at least allowed in, but I want to say that Richard, making this space available, because for a while there we had a limbo land where we had the radio time, but we couldn't produce the show. So
Right.
we did some things. We figured out some things where Jack did it on Skype, and then we got in. Then when it was Mike Nyman, Professor Mike Nyman of Buff State, who suggested Richard to me and Think Twice Radio. So that's where all this production has happened, and it's been in a very critical time and has taken off in this kind of way. And I think it's been, again, a real tool when people needed to know what's going on. So I think that's
absolutely.
part of what you bring, and also the change is good. So there's people I know. Well, there's lots of people that I don't know. So I would have never invited them on the show because I wouldn't have known them to think to invite them. So you're going to have a whole slew of, and you already have some of them in the hopper, I know. So so I'm excited to see what you're thinking of for new shows.
Yeah.
The biggest go ahead.
Jim has been giving me some great ideas, and I'm excited about trying out some new things. And in one of the kids told me today, I always have my group of boys on the Wednesdays, and they say, "Hey, we can even be on your show."
I was going to
And I
say
said,
that.
Yes, you can.
Didn't they?
And they
Now-
said, "Oh, wait a minute."
Hasn't Solomon been on our show? I know we've
He was
had
on
some
there
kids
once.
on our
Yeah,
show.
he was on once.
On
for
protest.
kids.
On protest. I don't think he wanted to.
Well,
Yeah,
you
but
just
yeah,
named-
on protest. I mean, he's very shy, but he did speak because he was just over the phone, so that wasn't too bad. Being on video
Yeah.
might be a story.
Yeah, and this is the unique opportunity that you have, because there needs to be through this mechanism, you can show the reality of what it's like. Right now you have on TV kids say the darndest thing. Well, you can have your own version, but it's not kids saying the darndest thing. It's kids responding to the news that they hear, that they know the adults are dealing with, that they don't get a chance to respond to. Now, that don't mean catch them and just throw a mic in them, but to start reaching out and have an opportunity for young people to talk about current events, issues that are in the news that they want to express. Reaching out to those elements of communities who are making the news as it relates around particularly around the foreign policy stuff, that already have communities here and seeing, what speakers who could share information about, how things are going. And it's no absolute, but letting people know there's a voice. Because once various communities realize that, hey, so and so is going to be on there, the word spread. And the next thing you know, when they realized that, oh, they weren't putting us down, they were really speaking the truth around the concern. That's what make people tune in. And because
Right.
what you're going to be doing is drawing a broad audience. Some people who have no idea about others, who are even some who have been made afraid because of the false fake news of the past, that here they can tune into a program, hear honest, healthy, moving forward talk of humanity. They can embrace that. And not just about humanity, but planet. Look,
Right.
Jack is able to make the connection as it relates to climate and those issues around climate and the planet to the things that get talked about. We would be doing shows, and no matter who the guest is, you could see the visualization in Jack's mind of how he sees connection, and he's not shy about weighing in. And I'm saying that's what you want. So organic, so just the great pearls of what happens when you have good conversation. And that's what Talking Peace provided.
Yeah, and one thing that I always did when I was producing is that whenever you say something with facts or opinions or whatever, it has to be true. It has to be spot on.
Absolutely.
Because once it's not spot on, if it's a
Yep.
falsehood, if it's a little bit of a fib, people find out and they're like, well, why should I listen to this for?
Sure.
Mhm.
So,
Sure.
so our shows have always been spot on, accurate, truthful, to the point, the facts, and nothing but the facts, ma'am. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right.
Well,
that's
there
right.
might be a little bit more than the facts.
Yeah.
But the actual facts. I mean, the
actual
truth,
fact-
truth,
Right.
and I
Not
say
the
truth
corporate-
and love, truth and love.
Not the
Yeah.
corporate facts,
Right.
The actual
Not the
facts.
corporate facts.
Not
that
the
somebody,
alternate
Right.
facts. What do they
Yeah,
call it?
not the
Alternative
alternate
facts, not the
facts.
alternative facts. No.
And constantly showing the connections again to the kind of work that you do and focus on, to how it connects to every issue, because it does.
Right.
What do the people say? No justice, no peace.
Right.
In the peace
Right.
movement, they say peace demands action. Now that don't mean crazy stuff.
Right.
That means the right to assemble and make your petition known. That also means participating in civic engagement. And because the Peace Center is already look, there are most groups, no matter what the issue is, don't think about calling the Peace Center. When people
we
are
know
in
they
trouble and hurting, they want to call the Peace Center because they figure the Peace Center can do it. The Peace Center
Yeah.
can do something, and it's not responsible to do all things, but the Peace Center could be like a beacon for drawing people together towards a way of getting done what they feel need to be done. Not that the Peace Center has got to do it, but Talking Peace provides voice in all of those directions.
Right.
It's more than the absence of war. It is the absence of the social justice that people expect and need at home and abroad.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I really, really enjoyed, this time, and our hours are almost done already. Can you believe it?
Right.
Um,
Right.
So, Vicki, do you want to say anything about our next hour? What our next hour will start to look like now?
Well, sure. And
Um,
actually, I think thank you for bringing it up in that kind of way, because I want to say, it's funny because it's just variations on a theme. So it's still Talking Peace, right? And we'll still deal with a lot of the same issues. And actually, in some ways, it might be this show that changes more, partly because, back to what I just said, if like you're going to be the one who's organizing the
Right.
show. You're going to be the one. So I know that you're thinking of a black farmers piece, right? An urban
Yeah.
farming piece, or different, however you want to shape it
Right.
and give it.
Right.
And I'm sure it'll come back more than once, right? In different kind of ways.
Right.
So different things that so this show might change in some ways more. And on the other hand, I do hope and I do think that things will shift in the Interfaith Peace Network has been going on and has worked really hand in hand and actually in me, body in body. So I'm one body of a person, in a body who's been, the executive director at the Western New York Peace Center formerly, and was also consulting for the Interfaith Peace Network. So I sort of brought both those things in the room with me every time, and which
Right.
really included, in a certain sort of a way, in Talking Peace. So there are things that we dealt with in Talking Peace that would very comfortably and logically be in Interfaith Peace Network. Talking Peace with the
Exactly.
Interfaith Peace Network. So I think back to about the students talking about Israel and Palestine, and that would be very typical for what I think we'd like to do. It was especially exciting that it was young people. It was also interesting that other people do not want to talk about that issue, or they're not able to talk about it without a lot of arguing. But
That's true.
those two young ladies, young women of real commitment and sensitivity, and very committed and emotional
Very
about the
supportive.
issues, but they were able to talk about it. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that we want to do, as to help people deal with both how does faith relate to these issues?
Right.
How does it help us deal with these issues? How does it even create its own issues? Or does it, or is, so some of those questions will come in.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly defending the sacred, I think, which is been something that I think the first time I saw it was with Indigenous people in our first Water is Life march, and then we sort of adopted it as something that is about what we're doing. That I sort of adopted it in the things, and offered it up to the Western New York Peace Center and to the Interfaith Peace Network. And I think
Yes.
that's part of a lot of what we'll be doing.
That's awesome. And so I look forward to seeing us doing more with that. And so stay tuned, everyone,
Oh,
for the next hour with Solomon Joseph.
could I? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That was the part I never got to. So tell
Yeah,
about the
he's going to
guests,
be on this today. Yes.
if you would.
And who else will be on with
So,
you?
so
I
Solomon
can't
Joseph, who is a young man of Indian origin, he was actually born there, moved to, I think it's Brooklyn. I'm not very savvy for New York City. But anyway, and he was in a very Dominican and, very international type neighborhood. It had some very strong Latino, Latinx influences on him, and is very committed to interfaith. So he's been working on Manifest Destiny. He's been publishing the Latino Village.
diversity.
Yeah, and he's going to be on. So, and then Faizan Haq. Now, Faizan
Eyes
Haq,
on.
who's very well known to a lot of people in the Western New York community, especially the Western New York Muslim community, where he created founded Western New York Muslims, and is also a professor at Buff State, and just a very hardworking, dedicated person of real commitment to justice and peace. So, and a longstanding member of IPN from very early on. So
Great.
anyway, so
Well, I just like to
and
thank everyone. I'm sorry. Yeah, our time is going. So
well,
thank you so
we
much.
still have time for last final words from people. We still have about
That's exactly what I was about to do.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Good.
Okay.
Just checking.
Well, I just
So
I,
yeah, we can go around.
Okay.
You want to start, Jack?
Sure.
Final thoughts?
I was just going to say that I think this whole Peace Center show really has kind of galvanized the progressive community to get involved and stay involved, and like Vicki would say, keep fighting the fight. It connected the dots, and I hope it continues to connect the dots. Like Vicki was saying, he's here enough shows with Vicki. It's connecting the dots, and okay.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this continues on, and if Deidra needs any help with show ideas or whatever, reach out in Olive Branch to consult with me, like I was talking to Vicki, and or Jim Anderson is very good. He knows the ropes. He's a radio king, so we could have some ideas for shows for you. So
That'd be awesome. Thanks.
that's
Indeed.
my thought. But go ahead, I guess, Jim.
Mhm. Well, what I would add, a show for you that is waiting in the wings for when you're ready, is that there's a international organization whose national representative is both national and international, but it is known as Mayors for Peace. And since we're in a change here in Buffalo, somewhere down the line, you may want to have them on to interview them and what it's all about and what it means. And in between that time, we'll give you some history about how the Peace Prince actually led the way to getting a mayor here to sign on who never acted on. So just wanted to put that in your ear, because I think in the political changes going on here, it would be good, and it would help the rest of the community to know what the organization Mayors for Peace represent and its importance to the work of the people. So I'll talk to you more about that and connect you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Vicki and Richard?
Well, and I don't know if Richard will join us for that part. We'll see if he gets in before the time is up. I would just say I'm just so grateful that you're going to be leading the way into the future for Talking Peace, because you are just the person, and I'm very grateful, glad and grateful. So just
Thanks.
excited to see what you'll do. So thanks so much.
Yeah,
Big
thank
hugs and
you
love.
all. Yes,
Thank you.
so you all have been listening to Talking Peace with Deidra Emel, Executive Director of the Western New York Peace Center. And we all wish you all peace and love. Thank you so much.
Peace out.
Yay, you did it.
Hey.
Great.
All right.
Great. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toe
No.
about ending it or not.
You
No,
just
because
did
I've
it.
got the clock going right there, and I don't want them to have to slow us down for the right amount of time. Anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would, like I said, I would do stuff locally that's current in the news, and
Okay.
get it from